Lindsay, I'm going to be referencing something in that Google Doc. If we could share that in the chat in the next few minutes, that would be wonderful. So, as you know, we were all just talking about navigating guilt. Guilt is one of those emotions that shows up to give us information, give us wisdom about, what's happening internally for us, especially in different situations that we face day to day. So just like other emotions, it can be something that's really quiet, could be really loud, could be something that's really overwhelming, or even intolerable, it feels like. So if you are able to access that Google Doc once it comes up, I do want to walk through something that could be one of those helpful tools we were all just talking about earlier. But I do want to mention, guilt is something that we've all felt. It's a very normal human emotion. It's one of those gut-wrenching ones, though, that feels like, powerlessness, abandonment, even shame. Some of those like really heavy emotions to carry with you day to day. And a lot of the times it can be really hard to kind of differentiate between, am I angry? Am I sad? Do I feel guilty? Do I feel overwhelmed? And a lot of the time we feel all of those things at the same time. And I think that's what makes it so much more difficult to navigate. So I'm going to see if I can maybe just share my screen really quick to show you all this chart.
Yeah, Kayla, it's not letting me drop it in the chat. I'm sorry. It's just saying no.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can put it in here. If not, I know that we'll get that out all to you. I just wanted to see if I could have it while we're chatting.
I'm trying to troubleshoot in the background too. If I get it, it'll show up shortly.
Okay. I loaded something in the chat. I'm not sure if it's going to open up. Yeah, that's a great. Flora just posted a question in the chat. Help us with navigating relationships with those close to us or on the opposite side and supporting policies that are extreme. That's, I think, something a lot of us are navigating, whether it's family, friends, people we work with. And that's really difficult because not every relationship, not every person is the same. I want to touch back on that once we get through this part here. So if you are able to open that document that I put in the chat, this is called an emotion wheel. So you may be familiar with it, you may not be, but what it is, it's a circle with in the center some main emotions like sad, bad, happy, and each row out it expands further into more specific emotions. So for example, yeah.
Excuse me, I clicked on it and I got a warning that there's a potential security issue has been detected on it.
Ooh, okay.
And that the emotion wheel may be harmful to my computer. Are you sure you want to download it? I don't know if other people are getting the same message or not.
Yeah, definitely. If it's saying that, don't go and download it. We'll have it in the document. I don't want you all to have any computer issues or anything.
That's a standard warning when you download files. That's all. It's okay. I downloaded it.
Okay, perfect. So if you are able to look at that emotion wheel, in the very center, you'll see sad. And if you expand out one more row, it's going to show guilt. But if you get even more specific with that, you'll see that it's near remorse and shame or feeling ashamed. So it's one of those really heavy emotions, like I was saying earlier, that makes it really difficult to navigate. So guilt shows up and tries to tell us when we've fallen short of some standard that we've set or maybe someone else's expectations. if we've acted against our values or our morals, or if we've maybe deeply hurt somebody that we've loved or cared for. Guilt is about our behavior, not who we are, which is an important distinction between guilt and shame. So if we look closely at guilt, although it's uncomfortable and overwhelming at times, it actually can be really helpful and guide our behavior. So what do we do when guilt shows up? Well, typically when we feel guilt, we are automatically responding in that situation, which tends to be really subconscious reactions. So we might immediately say sorry without hearing the other person out and how they're feeling. We may take back boundaries that we tried to set. We may say yes when we actually mean no. We may take on another project when we don't really have the capacity to do so. Some of us, especially those in the helping professions, may end up not expressing our needs or setting boundaries because we want to avoid conflict, or we think that the other person expects a lot out of us and we don't want to disappoint them. So most of those reactions, if not all of them, don't really have any conscious thought or decision making behind them. So in those moments, our nervous system is completely overwhelmed. It's going to work up into our fight or flight response or shut down into freeze. And when that happens, our body is actually trying to protect us and keep us safe and keep us comfortable, even if what's comfortable may end up being detrimental to us. So when guilt shows up, one of the first things that we can do is pause. Give ourselves some breathing room, some time and space to kind of sit with the guilt and see what's going on in order to choose a conscious path forward. A lot of the times when we're triggered or we're overwhelmed, we have that immediate reaction, and that's simply based on survival. There's no conscious thought or conscious me making that decision to respond in that way. So some things you might do if you feel really amped up or kind of anxious or really upset are going to be things that slow your nervous system down. So going outside, splashing cold water on your face, taking long breaths, sitting in the sun, putting an ice pack on your chest, eating a piece of sour candy, anything that can bring your attention and ground you in the present and just slow everything down. Now, if you're on the flip side of that, where you feel really shut down and it's hard to move, you may want to do something that's really slow, really small movements, maybe some stretching, or just kind of moving around, maybe going on a really slow walk. That will help bring your nervous system up, hopefully, into a state of safety. So once we've given ourselves some time and space to kind of come down or maybe come up into a space of safety, we're going to want to determine whether the guilt that's showing up is helpful or unhelpful. And this is an important distinction. So helpful guilt is going to show up, like I was saying earlier, when we've acted out of character, we've behaved outside of our values and our morals, or we've hurt someone or done something that we consider to be, bad. This guilt will make sense why it's there. Unhelpful guilt is based on the past. It's based on our early childhood experiences, our early relationships with adults, what we've learned to believe about ourselves, about other people, about the world, past trauma that we may have been through. Unhelpful guilt will show up in those moments and will only make sense if you take into account the past. Unhelpful guilt isn't about us acting outside of our character or acting outside of our values or morals. So there's an important distinction there. So once we've maybe and hopefully figured out whether the guilt that's present is helpful or unhelpful, we can then make an informed decision about how we want to move forward. Now, this may be doing nothing at all and just allowing the guilt to be present. If it's helpful guilt, maybe it'll guide us to make amends with somebody or apologize or just communicate with them. So I have a process that I like to share with individuals that I'm working with that I've kind of curated to fit our topic today. So instead of just telling you about it, I would like to walk you through it briefly. If you're willing to participate, please feel free to get comfortable. You can turn on and off your camera. Sit somewhere comfy where you're not going to topple over. If you're driving, please don't do this. So I'll give you a few minutes to kind of get settled, and I'll go ahead and walk you through some steps here. And just so you know, these will also be in that Google Doc that will be shared with you. So don't worry that you're going to miss writing everything down or anything like that if you do want to walk through the process. Okay. So if you do want to walk through this with me, please feel free to close your eyes if that feels comfortable. You can also let your gaze fall heavy towards the ground. The first thing that we're going to do is the first thing that I mentioned earlier, pause. So just pause, take a few breaths, relax tension in your shoulders, your face, your stomach. Maybe hold on to something that's really soft or cold or comforting in some type of way. What we're doing here is really trying to find some safety in your nervous system. And in safety, our conscious self can show up and kind of navigate life and decisions. So once we've taken a pause, maybe we've taken a few breaths, we feel a little bit more balanced in our nervous system. We're going to start by noticing the physical sensations that are there. And maybe you've already done that. You might notice some tension. You might notice your heart racing. You might notice feeling sweaty. Then maybe notice any emotions that are present. So we're talking about guilt right now. Maybe you're replaying a recent situation or conversation with someone where guilt showed up. Or maybe there's some hopelessness like we were talking about earlier that's present. It's important to know that we can feel multiple emotions at the same time. It doesn't just have to be one way or another. So you can scan from your head all the way down to your toes, looking for those physical sensations that you feel, and then noticing any emotions that are present. And we're not judging anything as good or bad. We're just noticing them and allowing them to be there. And the next part is getting curious or curiosity. So is this helpful or unhelpful guilt that's present? How do I know? Is this a situation I've been in before? Or what does this person, situation, or feeling remind me of, if anything? And this is where you're just kind of getting curious and wondering about what's going on in your internal world. No judgment, if we can help it. And you may spend some more time in this space than what I am right now. I just want to make sure we have time for everybody else's topics. And next, we might extend ourselves some compassion. So, for example, you might say something like, it makes sense why I'm feeling guilty because, I've always been taught to sacrifice myself and my needs for other people around me. And I'm just starting to set boundaries, and this is really hard and scary. It doesn't have to be something, overly positive or negative, just something really neutral and kind and understanding. And I know for a lot of us, compassion towards ourselves can be really difficult. So if that's something, a place you find yourself in, feel free to skip that. That's okay. And our last step will be the action piece. So this is where we kind of want to have a conversation with ourselves about what's our next move. So if we're talking about guilt, maybe helpful guilt showed up. Maybe I, need to dedicate more time to advocacy because that's one of my values, and, I've been putting it off for XYZ reason. Or maybe it's unhelpful guilt, and you can just allow the guilt to kind of be there. And maybe you go out and do like a group exercise class or meet with a friend or call a family member, just to kind of help yourself move through that. Maybe your next step is to communicate a boundary with somebody or to turn down that project because you don't have capacity to do it. Maybe it's calling that friend or family member that, we've been kind of in the outs with because of our differences. Or maybe it's ending that relationship. Action is anything that you want to take moving forward. And that could be just to cope or to do nothing at all. That's okay too. So no situation will ever be the same that we feel guilt in, and we're never the same person all of the time. So this process can be a really helpful tool along with the emotion wheel to just kind of ground ourselves, see what's going on internally for us, and see how we might navigate forward. So to kind of answer the question that was posed in the chat, this process, especially the action piece, will be something that's really important. And your decision to continue a relationship or end a relationship might be based on values. It might be based on your morals, right? Especially with the political stance going on right now. A lot of that's in question. So you might base that decision on something in that way if it's, difficult to see the next step. And I'm going to go ahead and let Miss Jessica jump in.
Thanks, Kayla. So the topic that I wanted to share that I think is important is about burnout and self-care. I really think this is important in advocacy, but also just in general. We all work or have worked, and so we know what it feels like to be overworked. Prior to becoming a therapist, I was a third grade teacher. Burnout happened very fast, and I didn't notice it until it was overwhelming. So I'm very aware of it as a therapist where it can come out a lot, and I try to have my clients become aware of that too. So what burnout is just like it's a lot of things, but what the main part of it is an overwhelming exhaustion. Like people describe it as a fatigue that does not go away with sleep. Feelings of detachment, cynicism, and just not feeling like you're getting anything done, and not like accomplishing anything. So there's 5 stages of this. All of these stages would have been nice to have known as a teacher, but hindsight. So these are good things to know now. So the first stage of burnout is this honeymoon phase where you're just super enthusiastic, you're like young, you're ready to go, you feel very passionately, very strong about what you're doing. And then stage 2 stress starts to set in. It might feel like anxiety, you might feel a little overworked, but you're going to push through it because that's what we're taught to do. Then the third stage is chronic stress. So this is when you start to neglect your personal needs, when you start to forget what you enjoy, what makes you happy. You're maybe this is like all consuming. You're doing this on the weekends, you're doing this after hours. Even if you're not necessarily working, you can feel it kind of consuming all your thoughts. Fourth is burnout. And this is where it really happens. This is the exhaustion, the despair. This is when physical symptoms set in. I know I experienced when I was going through burnout, I was sick a lot. My skin looked terrible. Like it just, your body knows what's going on sometimes before your mind does. So it's really paying attention to that. And then you get to the end, and that's habitual burnout. That's when you really need support, you really are struggling to function. Every day becomes more of a struggle. And so what is going to be sent out, I don't know if it was yet, but there is a burnout inventory, and it kind of goes through all the ways in which you might be experiencing burnout. If you're sitting here like, I'm tired, but I don't know if that's the case for me, it kind of goes through a list of it, and it has you kind of add it up and see where you are on the stages of burnout. So the next part of that is something called compassion fatigue. And I think this will hit for a lot of people that are doing advocacy work and a lot of people in any helping field at all. So this kind of describes the physical, emotional, and psychological impact of helping others. So there's, you could Google it and look at what's the difference between burnout and compassion fatigue, and there's not a whole lot different, except for this really makes you feel what other people are feeling. So it kind of goes through what is sympathy. Sympathy is I care about you, I hope you're feeling better. Empathy is I'm feeling what you're feeling. And compassion is I want to relieve your suffering. I want to relieve that pain for you. And so it's really like that in-depth type of, it's like the next step from empathy. And so with compassion fatigue, all of those feelings of I want to relieve this for you, that kind of starts to go away, and you start to become resentful or have detached feelings, maybe become a little jaded. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced maybe going to the doctor's office and there's like a nurse too rough, and you could just tell she's been in this really long and seen a lot of things. And I think that might be where you can kind of see where the compassion fatigue comes in. You start feeling like I'm overwhelmed, I'm overworked, and I'm tired. Once you get your back fatigue, it's important to self-care. What do you do? What hits the job? No. So, you just have to, I needed to work within the hours and nothing after that, nothing on the weekends. Like I needed to know what my boundaries were and not let anybody or anything kind of come around that. So setting goals for yourself of if this needs to change, how am I going to change it? And then kind of looking at the 5 realms that you exist in. This is physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual, and kind of hitting all of those places. So physical being exercise, but it also being sleep. Sleep makes a huge impact on our mental health. It's one of the first questions I ask clients is, how are you sleeping? Because if they're not sleeping well, there's very little you can do for them on a mental health, in a mental health arena. The mental part of this is journaling, reading, anything you can do to stimulate your mind. Emotional would be therapy, highly recommend. And recognizing your emotions using emotion wheels like the one that Kayla had. The social aspect is friendship. What are you doing where you are not isolating yourself? Are you meeting up with friends? Are you talking with family? Are you a part of activities? And then spiritual. So this doesn't need to mean religion. This just means being mindful. This could mean going outside and just like having a moment. This could mean, if you are religious, doing something with that. It just is something that kind of feels like it's elevating you. So the action item that I wanted everybody to have was making sure that every day you were doing 20 minutes of something for you. And this is something that brings you happiness, something that brings you peace, or something that you've told yourself that you don't have time for. We always say that. We always say, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to, take a shower. I don't have time to do a skincare routine. Or we have the time. It's how we're prioritizing it. And so really what I'm asking for you is to take 20 minutes to put yourself first. We have that time. We notice it when we're scrolling on Instagram or we're dissociating, staring at our computer screen. That time exists. So we want to make sure we're spending it wisely. And so the challenge that I'm really having everybody try and do for the next week is take that 20 minutes and just find something that makes you happy. I always talk about it as something that like we do fast. I think about like bedtime routines. We can do that very quick in 2 minutes, but if we just expand that out to 20 minutes and just make it the time that we're doing something for us, it's also a really good healthy way of getting better sleep, but it is also self-care. And so that will all be sent out, and the burnout inventory in case you guys aren't sure you're in burnout, but if you're not sure, you probably are. So just something to think about, and I'm going to hand it over to Meredith and have her go.
All right, so I really wanted to focus on hope today because being hopeful feels a little bit fraught right now with so much despair and heaviness. It almost can feel like we need permission to feel hopeful. So just zooming out a bit, it's been almost a decade since our political landscape changed pretty drastically, and the polarization that we've touched on that has been there has been slowly amplified over time. And then you throw a pandemic in there, and I would be really curious to know the number of times the word unprecedented has been used since 2020. And it started then and it has not stopped. And I think especially in the past few months, it has kind of ramped up again. Everything is unprecedented. Everything feels unprecedented. And that's the messaging we're getting from the news, from social media, from just conversations with friends, is it all feels like, well, we've never been here before. And so what do we do with that? So in order to have hope in the midst of the despair of the unprecedented times, we need for our hope to be radical. We need for it to be actionable and community driven. So radical hope is it's not just optimism or, believing that things will get better. It's much more values driven, community driven, actionable, all of those things. So I am going to share in the chat a model from an article that was published in 2020. Let me just quickly add this. So the article was, why is it not showing up? Okay, here we go. Well, okay. There we go. Radical hope model. Okay, sorry, technology is not cooperating today. Okay, so the model's there. In a 2020 article, the article is called Radical Hope in Revolting Times, Proposing a Culturally Relevant Psychological Framework by Della Mosley and colleagues. And it really gives us a beautiful blueprint for how we can think about hope. They developed the model based on the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So that is the lens that they're using. Which is, I think, important. I mean, it's a crucial layer of this. And I think something that I have been reminded of again and again in the past several years, but particularly since the election, of my privilege as a white person to say, oh, this is so unprecedented. How is this happening? What's going on? Of recognizing that BIPOC have had to live through oppression in some way, shape, or form for throughout the entire history of our country. So I think the fact that this model is situated around those experiences is really something important to highlight. So the model looks at both the past and the future, as well as the individual orientation and the collective orientation. So if we start in the past at the history of oppression and resistance, so looking at that collective level, a lot of this is unprecedented, and it's also not. And so if we can really dig into historical moments when people have had to resist and have had to push back and find different ways of being and different ways of doing things, and have had to come together as a community, we have a lot of really powerful examples. So that could be the right to vote, fittingly for the League of Women Voters. That could be the civil rights movement, could be looking at how people made it through the Japanese internment camps, learning more about Stonewall and the LGBTQ plus rights movement, and recognizing that for as long as there has been oppression, which is always, there has also been resistance. And we have these examples that probably weren't taught in most history classes, but that we can seek out and we can find this information. And then looking on the individual orientation in the past is ancestral pride. And they use a broader definition of ancestry. So that can mean people in your family. That might mean talking to relatives and asking about stories of how your family survived and thrived so that you could exist right now and that you could live in this country. But it could also be ancestry more broadly. So I've been thinking a lot about my queer and trans ancestors and the things that they accomplished, that they did to get us to this point. But having that sense of awareness and pride in what the individuals before us did, whether they were on the forefronts of an actual movement, or whether they were individuals who managed to make it through their day-to-day hardships. Looking then towards the future, so on that individual level, meaning and purpose is something that has kind of come up throughout this conversation tonight, of looking at your values and your motivating factors for being here tonight, for being a part of the League of Women Voters, or just for being a concerned citizen that cares about democracy. Those values might look different for every person here, but being able to label and identify, okay, this is what grounds me, this is what motivates me to show up and consistently do this work. And then lastly, envisioning possibilities is where it all comes together. So when we have a foundation of history and of that awareness and appreciation for what previous generations went through and what they fought for, when we have that foundation, when we have the understanding of our own personal values, we get to envision possibilities that don't yet exist. I just want to share a quote from the article about envisioning possibilities that I think sums it up pretty well. So collective memory allows people of color to recall and engage with actual examples of socio-political change that were at one time deemed far-fetched or altogether unlikely. People of color can bear witness to the faith and agency of the multi-ethnic coalitions that held onto and fought for inclusion, representation, and other forms of social justice. Through these components, people of color are able to envision what is possible given the socio-political circumstances. This envisioning must be collaborative if it is to help create change in a sustainable manner. what I love about this quote, this model, is that it acknowledges the hardship. It acknowledges the reality of whatever we're experiencing, and that, the phrase revolting times is in the title of this article. So whatever revolting times are happening, it faces that head on and says, okay, so what now? What can we envision together with our values and with our shared purpose towards social justice to change the world in the least cliche way possible. And I think there's something so powerful about that reminder of things that we take for granted today were at one point considered impossible and far-fetched. And I love that we're talking about this in this space, because if you are a part of the League of Women Voters, you already have a community of like-minded people who want to work towards this change. So you have that avenue. You probably also have friends and family and people in other areas who maybe are feeling hopeless and don't know how to show up right now and don't know how to do this work. And this is an opportunity to, think about how you want to show up individually and as a community. So the handout that is in the chat, and that will also be emailed out. In there, I included some reflection questions for you to be able to apply this model to your own life and think about specifically, okay, what parts of history are resonating with me now? How can I learn more about them? How did my ancestors survive and thrive? What are my personal values? What is driving my work, my personal life, all of that right now? And then what does an ideal world look like? And what is one step that I can take to make that a possibility? So like I said, really action-oriented, really community-driven. But at the end of the day, it gives us that permission to hope, of saying, we're not ignoring the reality. We're not trying to lean into toxic positivity. We're saying, okay, this is true. This is real. And what are we going to do about it? That feels really, really powerful in a time when it can seem like our power is being stripped away. I also included links to the actual article if you're interested in reading that, as well as a podcast on being, and they're currently focusing on hope as a theme. So that there's a episode there that's really powerful. So those resources are all included in the worksheet as well. I know we are almost at the end of our time together. So I just wanted to open it up for any other questions that we haven't covered, anything that we can help you help yourselves. And as you're also helping the community, we're happy to hear. So feel free to either put it in the chat or unmute yourself.
And I'm going to turn the recording off, so feel free to ask open and honestly. It's going to alert you in just a second here when it's completely turned off.